Hi, I'm Theo Gorman, and today we'll be looking at the extraordinary woman who is Sojourner Truth. Let's look a bit deeper. The life of Sojourner Truth, and the legacy she left in the United States of America. While we do not know her exact birthday, we do know that Sojourner Truth was born in roughly 1797 in Ulster County, New York. And while many of us know her as Sojourner Truth, she was originally born as Isabella Baumfree, to parents John and Elizabeth Baumfree. Her first slave master was Charles Hardenberg, but when he died when she was just 9 years old, she was sold to John Neely, separating her from her parents. Then she was sold to Martin Schreiber, and then finally to John Dumont. It was under John Dumont where Sojourner Truth experienced the oppression of slavery that built her to become the woman that helped create the United States of America that we know today. During her time with John Dumont, Sojourner Truth faced some seriously dire experiences. The one that she talked about most in later discussions was, first and foremost, the harassment that she faced from John Dumont's wife, but more importantly, the rape that she experienced from John Dumont himself. A consequence of this rape was having to give birth to 2 children, the first, James, who died in childbirth, and the second, Diana, who lived a lengthy life. Some years later, after giving birth to her first 2 children, she gave birth to 3 more, as a consequence of an arranged marriage by John Dumont with another slave, an elderly slave, called Thomas. She bore 3 children, Peter, Elizabeth, and Sophia. Then, just a few years later in 1826, following a disagreement with John Dumont about her and her child Sophia being freed, she fled from the Dumont plantation to the Van Wagenens, who purchased her for $20, fearing for her safety. In her biography, which was published later in life, she talked of leaving the Dumont plantation as follows: "I did not run away, I walked by daylight." This quote seemed to summarize her instinctive rebellious nature and spirit, which would continue to guide her actions later in life. Just a year after leaving the Dumont plantation, there was a full emancipation of all slaves in New York on the 4th of July, 1727. It was during this year that Sojourner Truth, who at the time was still called Isabella Baumfree, changed her name to Isabella Van Wagenen, after the family who had taken her in after she had fled from the Dumont plantation. After securing her own freedom, she turned her attention to her son, Peter, who had recently been illegally sold to a plantation owner in Alabama by the name of Solomon Gedney. Then, with the help of the Van Wagenens, she went to court, and after a powerful deposition from Sojourner Truth herself, she officially won, making history as the first ever black woman to win in court against a white man. In fact, the judge ruled in her favor, declaring, and I quote, "that the boy be delivered into the hands of his mother, having no other master, no other controller, no other conductor, but his mother." This victory was absolutely revolutionary, and is a true testament to the impact that Sojourner Truth had on the political and legal landscape of the United States at the time, but more importantly, her impact on the United States as a whole. It showed that the United States was ripe for revolution. It just needed the right people with the right motives to take the reins. After her monumental victory, Sojourner Truth had what she described as a spiritual awakening. Basically, she found herself feeling more connected to God, a calling from above to do something more. While Sojourner Truth had a religious background where her mother had talked to her about the Dutch Reform and Methodist teaching, she had never fully committed to the religion, and this was her calling to do so. Through this awakening, she found her way to New York City in 1828, where she found a job as a housekeeper. But really, her true passion could be found in the African Methodist Church, where she connected with other members of the community and other notable black leaders. It was here where she began to make a name for herself. Through her skill and power as an orator, she quickly became a community leader as an advocate for temperance, women's rights, abolitionism, and pacifism, and was one of the foremothers as an advocate for intersectional abolitionism. Over the next 11 years, Sojourner Truth continued to preach and work for the African Methodist Church. And then, in 1843, she had what she described as a second spiritual awakening. She officially changed her name to Sojourner Truth from Isabella Van Wagenen, and said in her biography that she felt that she needed to testify the hope that was in her, meaning she wanted to spread the love and courage and feelings that she had within her to those who didn't. So, in 1844, she left New York City, moving to Massachusetts, where she joined the Northampton Association of Education and Industry. There, she met lots of like-minded people, filled with the same burning passion that she had within her. There, she met abolitionists and feminists such as William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Susan B. Anthony. Using Massachusetts as a base, she continued to spread her influence, gaining more and more traction in the world of abolition. Most importantly, in 1850, at the Ohio Women's Rights Convention, Sojourner Truth made a speech that would change the political landscape of the United States forever. This speech was called Ain't I a Woman? Now, the notoriety of this speech did not just come from the impact that it had on those who had the privilege to listen to it, but it also came from the fact that it was one of the first speeches to acknowledge the sexism of the more prominent white feminists at the time. It was also one of the first to discuss the topic of intersectionality, a concept that wouldn't be discussed in mainstream American media until nearly a century and a half later. And while there may be discussions and there are disagreements on the exact wording of Ain't I a Woman, there is very little doubt that this speech will continue to be remembered for generations to come. Despite the success that Sojourner Truth was experiencing at the time, she continued to troop on, traveling the North, preaching and speaking on the topics that she truly believed in. She continued to tour up until the outbreak of the American Civil War, and while she had a strong stance as a pacifist, she used her skills and abilities as an advocate for black enlistment and helped manage supplies for the Union Army. Thankfully, her efforts did not go unnoticed, as on October 29, 1864, she received an invite to the White House from none other than Abraham Lincoln himself. Not only was this an incredible piece of recognition by Abraham Lincoln, but it also made Sojourner Truth one of the first ever documented African Americans to be invited to the White House. In fact, in a more charming recount of their interaction, it was said that Truth told Lincoln she hadn't heard of him before his presidency, and, I quote, with a smile on his face, Lincoln responded he had known of her work as an abolitionist long before they met. I believe this interaction shows her charm and wit, and also her reputation within the abolitionist community. Following the end of the American Civil War, while Sojourner Truth continued to preach, tour, and protest, due to her declining health, in 1872, she returned to Battle Creek, Michigan. And finally, on October 26, 1883, at age 86, Sojourner Truth passed away. There is very little evidence to question the significance and value of Sojourner Truth's life and legacy. And in a final quote from Marie Moss, a member of the Manhattan Community Board, the significance of Sojourner Truth's influence in the women's movement was beyond invaluable to women everywhere. Thank you for listening.